Hi everyone and welcome to my new video where we are going to be setting up my new bullet journal for the second half of the year. The notebook that I chose is this beautiful Sakura Breeze journal from Notebook Therapy, and I decided to try out the original size this time as it doesn't have as many pages. Here's a little comparison between the A5 size and the original size in case you are interested. By the way, I have an affiliate code for Notebook Therapy which gives you 10% off, and you can find that in the description along with all the supplies I used in this video. Now let's start setting up this new bullet journal, and I must say that I'm really excited to start using this journal. I've always used A5 size for my bullet journals, and this new size feels very refreshing, even though it's not that big of a change. As always, I skipped the first awkward page that doesn't fully open and started setting up my cover spread for this journal. I kinda wanted to continue the theme of my previous bullet journal setup for this second one as well, as we're still in the same year, but I changed it up a little bit. I started off by writing the year in the center, and I was thinking of adding part 2 or something, but it just didn't look very good on my sketch, so I left that out. The cherry blossoms on the cover of this journal inspired me to draw them on my new bullet journal setup as well, and I've posted a YouTube short where I show you how I draw this, so definitely check that out if interested. I will link it in the description. Basically, you just draw a flower with 5 petals and then add some stems and leaves around it. I'm using the Pigma micron fineliner in size 05 for the main outlines, so they stand out a little bit more. And when I was drawing these flowers, I made the top parts of the petals a bit wavy so they would look more organic. After the outlines were done, I started working on the details with a thinner pigma micron, and this is the size 01. I wanted to add some line shading on the top and bottom parts of the petals, as that makes them look a little bit more realistic, I guess. Basically, I'm adding the line shading on the wavy parts of the petals, so it looks like there are these little creases on them. I also added some lines in the center of the flower to make it look darker and not so weird looking. For the leaves, I added the center spine of the leaf, I guess, and then I darkened up the top and bottom parts again. I think I should have used the 05 size for the center spine as well, because it blended a bit too much with the other lines, but it's not that big of a deal. I don't remember how much time my previous bullet journal setup took, but I'm pretty sure that this setup was way more time consuming, as drawing these flowers takes a little bit more time, even though they are quite easy to draw. I had almost 7 hours of footage, and this setup took longer than I anticipated, but I really enjoyed setting this up, and I'm also very happy with how it turned out. As usual, I like to keep the beginning pages of my journals quite neutral, so I again went for a black and white look with some pop of gold, and I used my gold watercolor for this, which is really shiny and pretty. Instead of coloring the flowers, I just added these little blobs of gold on top of them, and at first I wasn't really sure if I like this look. But now that I'm editing this video, I think it turned out well, especially after I added the rest of the decorations. These little blobs don't have to be symmetrical, and you can have fun with changing the size of them, as that gives a little bit more interesting look in my opinion. It can be difficult to know when to stop though, and I might have gone a little bit overboard with this, but that's fine, and at least I had fun painting these. When the paint had dried up, I fixed a little mistake with my white gel pen, and then I went on top of the line art in places where the gold watercolor is, so that it wouldn't cover the lines. You could also paint the gold dots before drawing the line art, and that way you could skip this step, but I just like to do things this way as it's easier to see where the gold dots look the best. I think this was a tiny little step that was very important because it made the whole illustration look more finished and also added a slightly more contrast, I guess. After I was happy with the illustration, I decided to cut the page a little bit to create a dot store. Then I decided to add this light pink washi tape on the side of the page, and I usually go for a bit more neutral colors, but pink is basically a neutral for me at this point. So I wanted to use that, and it also went well with the cover of my journal. If you can't tell by the notebook I chose and the tablecloth I have, pink is actually my favorite color, and I had a phase when I was in secondary school when I changed my favorite color to blue because I felt like pink wasn't as cool. I don't know where that thought came from, but now I embrace the pink. Anyway, on the page underneath I added this old book page that I printed, and I also printed a black and white version of it, but I felt like that would have been a bit too cool toned, I guess, so I went with this one. I still haven't bought old books that I could use for this purpose, even though I came across some at a local cafe, but I will definitely do that sometime in the future, as I think recycling actual old books might be a bit more environmentally friendly. On the left side I decided to glue down this colored watercolor paper that went well with the other colors in my opinion, and I like that this is just a solid color instead of a paper with a pattern, as now the illustration gets all the attention it needs. I tried to align the watercolor paper with my notebook page on the top, so I would have to only cut the two sides. On this page I added a little transparent pocket that I made from tracing paper, and inside the pocket I added my grid spacing ruler, which is a must-have for me as it saves a lot of time when I'm setting up my bullet journal. If you would like to learn more about that and how to make one, I recently uploaded a separate video about that, as I've got a lot of questions on it and I thought making a separate video would be a bit better idea, so you can see the process better. Here you can see the grid guide I made, and I also added a key guide, I guess, which I just took from my previous journal because I was too lazy to make a new one. Now we can finally move on to the next spread, and this is going to be a mid-year reflection spread where I can write about how my year has been so far. I kind of forgot to use my goal setting spread from my previous journal as I didn't feel like setting very big goals for this year, and instead of making a new spread for my goals, I thought it would be a better idea to celebrate the small wins, I guess, as it's sometimes easy to just forget them and focus too much on things you didn't achieve. This is something I definitely struggle with as a perfectionist, and I've tried to intentionally focus on the small achievements and positive things to change my mindset. It's not something that happens overnight, but adding these kinds of reflection spreads can really help with that. I would love to hear what you think these kinds of reflection spreads and whether you add those in your bullet journal, so let me know in the comments. Anyway, for the decorations, I again used a little cherry blossom illustration in the empty corner. I used the same gold paint to color the numbers, and the key with this gold paint is to activate it with water before you start using it, as it looks more opaque when you do that. I like to do this by adding some water in the pan, and then I just wait until the paint absorbs it a little bit. Like I said earlier, I wasn't completely sure if I liked the abstract paint blobs on the top of the illustration, so I decided to try coloring just the leaves and the little circles in the center of the flower, and I don't know, it still doesn't look quite right for me. I don't really know what was the look I was going for, but I'm still very happy with how this illustration turned out. Next I wrote out the questions for my mid-year reflection, and I wanted to focus on things I've learned, as I think that's a good way to notice the small achievements, as well. Instead of goals, I'm going to write about things I want to prioritize for the rest of this year, and I also have some space for action steps. So I guess these are also goals, but phrased in a different way that hopefully works better for me. On the bottom, I also added this start, stop, continue section where I will write out some habits or other things that would be beneficial for my well-being. Next, we are going to be making my future log, and I like to keep this spread very simple. If you don't know what a future log is, it's basically a yearly overview where you can write important events and appointments before you have set up your monthly spreads. I wrote out the monthly calendars off camera just to save some time, and I decided to write them on this grid paper so the spread would have a little bit more texture. Writing out the numbers took a really long time, and you could also use pre-made calendar stickers for this to save some time. I've done that for my previous bullet journal setups and that worked really well, but now I wanted to go for this hand-made look just for a change. Once I had written down the months on the top of the calendars, I decided to add some gold lines between the titles, and this was a really simple way to make the spread a little bit more interesting. By the way, I have about 8 dots of writing space below each calendar, and that works really well for me because I mainly just use this spread for writing out birthdays. If you need more writing space though, you could always use 2 spreads for this and have 6 months in each spread. Now let's move on to the next spread, which is going to be my plant tracker spread, which is a must-have for me because I have quite a lot of plants. You could use this layout for something else as well, like for example a health tracker, or you could even make all your habit trackers in advance if you don't want to worry about setting them up later. I wanted to have my plant tracker ready for the rest of the year, and since I'm starting to use this journal in August, I cut out 4 Dutch doors with little tabs. I cut the Dutch door from the third dot horizontally, and then I also cut out the top part of the page so I would have some space for the title. I used my X-Acto knife for this because I find that to be a little bit more precise, but you just have to be very careful so you don't accidentally cut the notebook's binding. If you are curious about how this plant tracker works, I will basically just track the watering schedule of my plants here, as some plants need more water than others. I use a soilless potting mix for my plants, so I have to fertilize them more often, and I also like to track when I fertilize them because of that. I will mark down the days when I give water to my plants with a circle, and if I fertilize the plant as well, I will add a little dot inside of that. I have posted a how I bullet journal video last year, so definitely check that one out if you would like to see how I use the spreads I've made. And I also talk more about my journaling routine in that video. I will link it in the end screen and description so you can check that out after this video. Anyway, now this tracker is basically ready and it's time for the decorations. I wanted to keep this spread a little bit more on the simple side, so I decided to use some different kinds of papers I had for making a little collage. I decided to go for this pink watercolor paper that I had because it looked very pretty with the old book page, and I felt like the paper I used on my cover spread had too similar color with the book page, so that's why I went with this pink one. I wanted to save some time with the decoration, so I decided to use this tracing paper trick with the cherry blossoms and just trace the ones I drew on the first spread. This way I could skip the sketching part, and the tracing paper also gives a little bit different look, which works really well with collages in my opinion. I decided to draw the cherry blossoms next to each other, so I could save the extra tracing paper for some other future collages, I guess. I also decided to trace just the outlines, and add the finer details on top of that, because I feel like those are easier to add without tracing, as it's really easy for me to see where I should add them. I always use a glue stick for attaching the tracing paper in my journal because that dries clear and glue tape would have shown through the illustration. As you can see, I cut out the cherry blossoms in a way that there's a little bit of space around them, and now they kind of look like transparent stickers, which I really like. Instead of using washi tape for the tabs like I've done with my previous setups, I decided to just paint them with the gold watercolor because I felt like that was a little bit quicker, and this spread also needed some gold in it. I also added some random little gold blobs around the cherry blossoms to tie the spread together, and I think it ended up looking really pretty. Now we are going to be setting up my budget tracker, and I decided to change the layout a little bit so it would work a bit better for me. I think a budget tracker is something that has to fit your specific needs, and my layout definitely doesn't work for everyone. I mainly use my budget tracker for tracking the income I make with my YouTube videos and affiliate codes, as I have to fill out my taxes at the end of the year, and this makes it a little bit easier. I decided to make this kind of table with a box for all the income streams, and then I have the months written on the left side so I can easily see how much money I get from each income stream, if that makes sense. On the right side I also will have a wish list and a savings tracker, which help me to think about what I actually need instead of making very impulsive decisions. Because I didn't have a lot of writing space, I had to come up with sorted names, and I want to clarify that the BJ in my tracker means bullet journal and not what you think. I didn't know what else two letters I could have used, so this just made the most sense. The way this wish list works is that I will write out the item I would like to buy and then the store and the price of the item so I can see how much money it would cost. I guess the savings tracker is very similar, but I'm going to be using this for planning out bigger purchases like a new phone or a laptop that can be quite expensive. I'm also going to be tracking how much money I save for those items every month, so that will hopefully motivate me to not use my money for some other not so necessary things. This is the first time I'm including a savings tracker in my bullet journal, and we will see how it will end up working for me. Anyway, for the decorations I decided to draw a little cherry blossom and also color some of the lines with pink just to add a bit more color. Then I of course added some gold lines as well, so the setup would be a bit more cohesive. Now we are setting up a spread that I've never done before, and I'm excited to see how it will work for me. I think taking care of your health is really important, so I wanted to make a how I'm feeling check-in spread, which I will basically use for seeing how I'm doing. I will write some routines that make me feel good, and these are also things I usually do when I'm doing well. Then I will have a section where I will write about bad habits to be aware of, and these are kind of warning signs that I might not be doing so well if I keep doing these habits. This can be something like overworking or not seeing other people enough. Making YouTube videos, for example, is quite lonely as the editing process takes a really long time, and it's easy to forget to take breaks because I will be so focused on the editing. So it's important for me to be aware of that and, for example, go for a walk after sitting in front of the computer all day. On the bottom I have a section where I will write what to do when I'm feeling down, and this is going to be a list of things that make me happy, like crocheting and knitting, for example. Anyway, on the right side I made a page for important reminders, and these are basically just things I need to remind myself about when I'm feeling down. I will show you some of the reminders I wrote later. When I was setting this up, I accidentally managed to cut one of the bookmarks, and this is actually the second time this has happened to me. But luckily I didn't cut the bookmark completely off like I've done before. Please let me know that I'm not the only one who has accidentally done this. I really need to start being more careful when I'm cutting things in my journal. Let me also know if you know how I could fix this. I was thinking of gluing a piece with washi tape maybe, or then I could also sew it back together I guess, but I'm not very experienced with that. Anyway, I wanted to make a little transparent pocket again where I could store those important reminders, and I decided to decorate that with these pieces of paper that I tore, and then I used my alphabet stamps from Notebook Therapy for stamping the header on the pocket. I felt like that wasn't enough though, so I decided to add some washi tape on the top of it and also some stickers later. These stickers are from Oak Monica, and I will leave a link to their Etsy shop in the description. I really love her style and I've bought stickers from her a couple times. Here you can see some of the reminders I wrote, and I wrote them in the same grid paper that I used for my monthly calendars on my future log. I feel like I should have made a little bit smaller pocket for these though, because now it's a little bit difficult to get them out of that, but at least they won't easily slide out of the pocket I guess. For the final details, I decided to add these simple floral stickers from Sleepy House Lion, and I really like how they look on this page. I will also leave a link to Lisa's shop so you can check that out, and you definitely should, especially if you like cats. Anyway, let's move on to the next spread, and this is going to be my things to check out and 2023 favorite spread, which I always like to make in my bullet journal. By the way, I forgot to say earlier that I try to set up these spreads in a way that the most used spreads like my future log and my plan tracker are in the beginning. This way it's easier to find them as I don't use an index. Usually I've had 4 different categories in these things to check out page, but I did a slightly different layout with 6 boxes on my sister's bullet journal, and I actually ended up liking that one a lot more, so I decided to use it in my own bullet journal as well. If you would like to see how my sister's bullet journal turned out, I've posted a flip through about that, and I will also try to remember to link that in the description. The 6 different categories that I have are books, TV shows, podcasts, movies, and music. And then I also have a section for other random things like tea or stationery recommendations. I would love to hear if you have any favorite TV shows or other recommendations I could add on this page, so definitely let me know in the comments. This is a random recommendation, but I recently found these everything I've crocheted videos where people show everything they have crocheted in a year or a couple of months, and that's been very inspiring. I don't have any specific channel recommendations though, but you can find a lot of those videos if you just search everything I've crocheted or knitted. Let me know if you would like to see that kind of video from me. I could do maybe a YouTube short about that. So maybe leave some kind of yarn emoji in the comments if that's something you are interested in seeing. Anyway, I have the same 6 categories on my favorites page, and I divided the boxes so I could write a little bit more information about the books and movies, like the author and the date I went to see the movie. I still haven't read any books this year, but hopefully I will read at least one book maybe during the autumn, which is the perfect season for doing some cozy things like that at home. For the decorations, I drew little cherry blossoms on both sides and also added some gold lines below the headers and some golden little sparkles, of course. I think I should have used a little bit thinner brush for painting these though, because they ended up looking a bit weird, but it's fine and you can't really see that if you look at the journal more far away. The last spread I wanted to include in my new bullet journal setup was this YouTube content planner, and I took a little bit of inspiration for this spread from Tina's diary. If you haven't checked out Tina's channel yet, you definitely should, as she's an amazing artist and also a friend of mine, and I will link her YouTube channel in the description. The left side of this spread is like a brain dump page where I will just write all my video and theme ideas and things like that. The right side, on the other hand, is going to be for planning out the content, and this is where I used Tina's layout as an inspiration, as it looked very useful and I'm really excited to see how this will work for me. If you are not a content creator, you could always use this kind of spread for planning out other work or school projects, and I guess you could also use this spread for some hobbies as well. I wrote out the mini calendars on the right side and also added the week numbers on the left side, just in case I happen to need them. I used a zebra Sarasa gel pen for the week numbers so they wouldn't take that much attention, and I love this gel pen a lot, but it always ends up smudging if I erase the pencil marks, so I usually use it just for writing in my travel journal. Because I had already spent so much time on setting up this journal, I wanted to keep this spread simple and did a collage for the decorations. I used the same watercolor paper that I used on my cover spread and then added the book page on top. I also decided to use the same tracing paper trick that I did on my plant tracker spread, but this time I wanted to try out how the gold paint would look if I painted it first before I attached the tracing paper on top of that. I think it ended up looking quite nice, even though the gold isn't as shiny and vibrant when you have the tracing paper on top. I also painted these gold lines on the bottom of the title and then added that on the left side as well because the watercolor paper looked a bit empty. Now it's time for the final flip through. I really like how the setup turned out and I love how it kind of matches the cover of my journal. Like I said earlier, it took a really long time to set up, but I think it was worth the time and you could always simplify the spreads if you want something that's quicker. I hope you found some inspiration or new ideas from this video, and I would also love to hear what you think of this setup. Remember to leave a like and also a sun emoji in the comments if you enjoyed this video. Oh, and definitely consider subscribing if you would like to see more. Thank you so much for watching and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye bye!